So, whenever we were talking about doing this talk tonight and what we should be trying to tell people or explain to them about what we do and how we do it, there's a big discussion to be had. We cover a whole range of interpretive design, which is huge, and the techniques involved in it is massive as well. So in the next 30 minutes, I'm not going to try and cover it all because it would be not done very well. So I'm trying to focus on a few key things and a few things that we hold very dear to ourselves, and some experiences that we've had during the last 12, 13 years that have really made a big impact on ourselves and the way we work. So, as you've heard, we're called Tandem, and we create interpretive experiences which captivate, thrill, and inspire. Now, as I'm sure you all have experienced, people ask you what you do for a living. I say, we're interpretive designers. Generally, they walk away or say, right, what exactly is that? So I say, this is what it is. If this goes well tonight, I'm just going to keep this in a memory stick, and I'm going to give it to them, because I spent a long time trying to explain it. It's everything from temporary to permanent exhibitions. It's everything from ancient history to modern history. It's everything from physical hands-on to more in-depth reading. Interpretation covers many periods of history, all history, and can be delivered in many different ways. But I have to set up from the beginning what it is not. It's not just posters. It's more than just old things. And it's certainly not interpretive dance. The posters thing, I actually turned up to one of the biggest projects we've ever done. The project manager asked us completely blankly, so when do you guys come in and put up the posters? So I need to do a wee bit of work there. My wife and children refer to what I do as doing old things. And Sarah, who used to work in Tandem, all her friends thought she was an interpretive dancer. So that's certainly not what we do. But this man actually defines what we do. This is a guy called Freeman Tilden, who in the 50s was working in American national parks. And he was observing people coming into the forests, having a great time exploring, discovering, but not necessarily learning or taking from the environment and the landscape what they could be doing. So he sat down and wrote a book. This is 1957. Within it, he set out some guiding principles for interpretation, all of which can still be applied today, and all of which help us understand what we do. Now, I am going to give some examples of some of these. Some of them are quite high-fluting, but some of them are easier accessed. So it's an educational activity which aims to reveal meanings and relationships rather than simply communicate factual information. I'm sure we all had some bad teachers at school who just yabbity, 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 yabbity. But it's the teachers that really inspired you, the ones that took you beneath that. They actually explained why things happened and how these impacted other people. Interpretation is the revelation of a larger truth that lies behind any statement of fact. It's got a reasonably good example of this one. So, as I'm sure you all know, the Normans invaded Ireland in 1169. Obviously, everybody knows that. But what we don't know, when we dig a bit deeper, is that they didn't. They were actually invited by Dermot McMurrough, and before that, they had to seek permission from the Pope before they invaded or arrived in Ireland. They actually came in a small force, and it's 3 more years before they came en masse. Dermot McMurrough was the King of Leinster and had been usurped by the other kings of Ireland and was a little bit peeved. So he went to the Normans in northern France and said, I'll give you Ireland if you give me back Leinster. And so the whole tide of Irish history was changed forever. So this is what we do. We look at facts, we look at stories, and we try to get the story behind them. We try to drill down into what the bigger picture is, why things happened. People just don't turn up and invade a country. There's generally a reason that they want to come or why they're coming. But what it's definitely not, when we look at interpretation, it's not instruction. What we try to achieve is people learning through enjoyment. Apart from my children who now get fed up going to every castle in Ireland, every cultural centre in Ireland, but they love it, really. Interpretation should relate what has been displayed or described to something within the personality or experience of the visitor. People relate to people. People can only really connect to other people's stories. Take the people out, it's very dry and not really that involved. People need to understand how this situation impacted on different people. I'm going to show you a slide now, which is possibly one of the most inspirational artifacts you will ever see in your life. Okay, I was kind of hoping you'd all go, wow, that's awesome. I'll give a little bit of context to this, because this really is an amazing artifact. So on June 20th, 1642, the siege of Limerick Castle was into its 32nd day. The siege was based around tunnel warfare, where the besiegers, the Irish on the outside, were tunneling under the curtain walls of the castle, while the defenders were countermining or undermining the attackers. On the morning of June the 20th, the mine coming in met the countermine coming out. A battle ensued in a very small tunnel, and this is a gun was dropped in mine 2. When we were working in King John's Castle, we were delighted. I've gone on one thing, I'm going to skip back. When we were working in King John's Castle, we were reading the book and talking to an archaeologist, and we were trying to find out more about this incredible gun that was dropped on this date at the siege. The siege was, there was a complete diary for the whole siege, so we knew exactly what happened every day. We asked him about this. We thought, we've got to get this, we've got to put it on display because it relates directly to the story of the castle. And he said, yeah, well, it's a slight problem. It was lost in 1642, and in 1994, after it was found, it was lost again. And it had gone across to the National Museum in Dublin to get cleaned, and it vanished. So we were disappointed, but we still wanted to focus on the story and tell it's part of the whole experience. But 2 months later, it turned up in a bit of Tupperware under the archaeologist's bed. So we were delighted. We thought, brilliant, it's back. So we went down to the Limerick Museum. We had lost it again. So we thought, right, this just isn't going to happen. Luckily, they did find it again. So we got it, and we had a look at it, and we sent it off to get it conserved. In the meantime, under the glass box within King John's Castle, there's the undercroft. And we wanted to expose this bit of wall for the visitors coming through. We were doing a lighting test one day. We were down here trying to work out where the lights needed to go, and we looked over this wall beyond, and we spotted a rather large hole. We climbed over, got the torches into it, checked the siege plans. Turns out this is Tunnel 2 and Countermine 3. So this is an actual tunnel that the gun had been dropped in. Nobody had thought to mention that it still existed. When it's properly photographed, it looks something like this. So we knew the guy, there's a chap called Pope, who was countermining from this side. We knew the Irish Confederates were mining from their side. But then we also know where the tunnel met, just beyond that prop at that specific point on that morning in June. Just there. So what you're looking at beyond that is where that happened. We knew the gun was found in the ground, but beyond that hole, this gun. So we know that that was being held by a Confederate soldier at that time when the gentleman called Pope cut through it and they came face to face. We know several Irishmen died within the tunnel that day. Pope survived and lived to fight another day within the tunnels. So we got it cleaned and stabilized, and it started to look like this. We were pleased because it starts to look more like a gun. You can start seeing little indents and things in the barrel. We knew it's a flintlock pistol, so the story was starting to come together. So we decided to put it on display as part of the visitor experience in King John's Castle. On the morning that we were putting it in, the conservator brought it in. Said, oh, I should have mentioned, when it's cleaning it, the mechanism's still in place. And what I've discovered is that the musket ball is still within the barrel. What we were able to conclude, therefore, is that the Irish Confederate soldier that was holding that on that morning in June had the pistol cocked ready to fire, but didn't quite make it out alive and dropped it. So the chances are the gentleman that was holding that in that battle was one of the ones that died that fateful morning. So this starts to build a whole story for us whenever we're trying to interpret an object in the context of a story, in the context of a siege. So it ended up on display in this particular zone, which is all about the siege of 1642. We put a comparable gun next to it. But then we put a wider context. We've got graphic panels, we've got touch screens, we've got a death toll counter within this environment. So there's a whole layering of information. There's a whole several routes of access to the information. I'm going to play a short excerpt of the chap that is standing beside this gun on a screen that when you walk in, he starts talking to you. If he plays.
Death and the devil! Watch out! The rebels shoot from 15 places round about us. Would that I could return their fire. But the constable dictates that we save our powder. You know, we have only 5 small barrels in the stores. Aye, of course you do. You and I and every Irish musketeer knows it. Thanks to that turncoat, Dominic Fanning.
So this is zone 4 within King John's Castle. So the black box experience before you actually go to the castle, where we're telling people about the story of the castle, how it was built, the people who built it, the sieges that it went through, and really right up to the modern day. So you meet him here. You understand the story of the siege and the tunnels. You go through an undercroft where you see these siege tunnels. You come out into the castle and you journey through the towers. And one of the towers, you meet him a few days later. Looking a little bit worse for wear now. He's lost his lovely red coat. He didn't actually lose weight for this role. It's just very clever lighting.
Our supplies of food and powder are spent. The flux has taken a grip upon our bellies. We are weak and miserable sick, half living and half dead. Nor has our luck lasted against the enemy. Our sallies, those boys on ropes, are discovered now before they light a match. Or else the Irish quickly quench their fire before it takes.
And then one last time, in the final zone of the exhibition, they actually discover more about the archaeology. So the visitors now journey through this story at 3 different points within the exhibition and the visitor experience. They've discovered a story about the gun being lost. They've met soldiers associated with it. They've discovered within the castle. And now they've discovered about the archaeology. And telling the story of archaeology is vitally important to us because people need to understand why archaeology needs funded and needs to happen, because it tells us all the things we need to know, or at least gives an indication of certain things. But to be able to do all these things and take one photograph and turn it into a series of exhibits, we need to understand our audience. Now, that's challenging because our audience ranges from 8 to 88, ranges from people with English as a first language or with no English at all, with all the different learning styles that we cater for within schools. So there's a huge spread. We've got to be able to layer interpretation to make sure that people coming through will understand something, will learn something from each exhibition or visitor experience. The classification for these, we can fit them into 4 visitor types. Our first is a two-dipper, and you can all decide which one you fit into here, but two-dipper will go to a visitor experience or an exhibition. They'll walk through it, a visitor experience that maybe lasts 2 hours, they'll probably be through it in half an hour. They'll get a good understanding, learn a couple of factlets that they can amaze their friends and family with at the weekend, and then they move on. We have the paddler. The paddler will do more, look at more, read more, watch all the movies, interact on the touch screens, get a little bit more. This is one of the more mainstream visitor types. We have the swimmer, who will do everything. They will do everything, and they'll probably buy the T-shirt when they leave, and they'll have a really good experience. They'll have learned a lot of different things. They'll really understand the context of the story. And you've got the diver. The diver will do everything twice, come back next weekend again, take his kids the following weekend, and then buy all the books, and then think he can do it better than us. The visitors we cater for generally, when we're layering interpretation, will be the paddler and the swimmer, because those are the main types of visitors you get. We also try to layer the interpretation to make sure we're appealing to the 8 to 88, and to make sure that we're giving people things to read, to interact with, to watch, to try and cater for all the different learning styles. So what we do, I hear you cry, is everything from the lowly, humble graphic panel, which is a fantastic way to set a scene when you walk into an environment. When we first started working this, a graphic panel about this size here, it was okay to have 400 to 500 words on it. In the last decade, this has changed. A panel that size, maybe 50 words now. Copywriters have to work so much harder now to capture the imagination, to fire the imagination, and to hold people in. That's where graphics can be very clever at layering the content, helping people find their way through. It's like any good graphic design, like the front cover of a newspaper. You start with the headline, strap line, the main story, and then you build them into body copy. Same way a graphic panel can. Projections and animations. Another great way to get first person or highly complex stories across in a short period of time. Again, when we first started this, movies were about 7 to 8 minutes long if you were making them. They've plummeted to 3 minutes. A lot of people are saying now you should make a movie not more than 2 minutes long for people's attention span. That's directly related to the way our brains are developing and the way we're responding to the internet or the World Wide Web. Physical interactives, fantastic way to engage children. You'll notice that my arm on this side is longer than this arm because my children tend to drag me. So when I walk into the exhibition and I see physical interactives, I am very happy because I can do them with my children. We can learn from them. They can be simple ones where you just understand the structure of an abbey. They can be ones where you understand the decks of a ship. But these are a great way for one-on-one or group learning. Dress-ups, always popular. My daughter will be delighted with that one. What we've discovered as well is we used to only put children's dress up, but we have to put adults dress up in now, clearly labelled adults, because children's dress up was getting ripped by adults trying to get into it. We've learned that you really never grew up. Touchscreens are a fantastic way to layer information so people can delve deeper and deeper and deeper. Big challenge to touchscreens is that if you've got too much content and you've got a diver, they will stay at that touchscreen for 10, 15 minutes. If there's only one touchscreen covering that content within an exhibition, that closes it down to every other visitor. We have to assess everything we do for what we call dwell time. And we look at the way when we're designing space, how many people have to go through that to meet the target numbers, how many people the capacity can cope with. And we make sure that everything's designed for maybe 1 minute, 2 minute, or 3 minute dwell time. But we give people an opportunity to layer it further. If we want to have a really complex touchscreen, we'll have more than one bit of hardware. Models are a fantastic way to explain what a landscape used to look like. This is St. Mary's Cathedral next to King John's Castle in Limerick. The main purpose of this was to let people see how the medieval city grew out on King's Island, but also to signpost people to the parts of medieval Limerick which they can still visit. A lot of it is hidden behind other buildings or only partly remaining, or the city walls are gone apart from this small stretch. This was people immersed in the medieval Limerick, but finding that they could actually go and see parts of medieval Limerick as soon as they leave King John's Castle. Plus, they're just awesome to look at. When you look at this, the guys that, same guys did one of the models in Titanic Belfast. They always hide something in it. And the one in Titanic Belfast of the Thompson Dock, next time you're in there, have a little look. Check along the fence and you'll see a little chap doing something you shouldn't be doing. Equivalently, if you're in King John's Castle, I won't spoil it for you, but there's a little hidden, tiny little thing in there. Illustrations are another fantastic way that we can use stories and history to communicate a story. This is the Great Hall at King John's Castle. It's completely gone now, apart from the base of it. So it's letting people see how it's constructed, the stages it was constructed. Children's characters to actually help people understand, or children to connect through an activity sheet or follow a character through a journey. We use a similar character at Dunluce Castle called Randall MacDonald. So the children have an audio guide they follow where Randall takes them around looking for things he's lost. And the adult version tells the same stories but in a more adult way. People love to comment, so comment cards. Some people write essays, some people leave a few words. Some people write comments completely unrelated to the exhibition, and these have to be monitored. But these are a great way then, you can tweet, you can share what people are commenting. It's a great way to find out quickly how people are responding to what you've been doing. So back to Freeman. Interpretation exposes the soul of things, the truth that lies behind by provocation. We did an exhibition a couple of years ago in Derry, Londonderry, I think that's the right way of saying it now, about the plantation of Derry. Probably one of the toughest subjects we've had to tackle so far is how do we tell the plantation of Derry right down the middle for everybody to come into the Guildhall, which is a cross-party supported building. Everybody believes it's a very community shared space. The whole story of the plantation of Derry is one of those ones that definitely is misunderstood by a lot of people. So we decided we had to actually provoke people into a response. One of the centerpieces within the exhibition, you've got 3 different debates, 3 different characters each time, where you listen to the debate. This was one of the hardest shoots we ever did, actually. It's 3 actors, all in front of 3 cameras, all had to be perfectly synced. They debate the pros and cons of their life. So what most people don't realize is that the plantation was very like the banking crisis of a few years ago. The only people who actually benefited from it were the rich in London. The people who were sent from London, Lowlands, Scotland, to plant northwest Ulster did not want to come. They were living a good, sensible life in central London. They had everything they needed, and they were going to be sent off to the wild northwest where they heard about beheadings and burnings and babies and pitchforks and all sorts of things. The lowland farmers from Scotland had well-matured land that they could grow things on. The northwest of Ulster was forest. They had to go and deforest this place. There was areas where the farmers were told they were getting 40,000 acres, and they got there to find they had 400,000 acres. They weren't allowed to hire Irish farmers to farm the land, but eventually they had to. This whole debate chamber is only 2 minutes of time, and it talks about, so this is the London companies. We've got the Irish farmer, and we've got the Scottish farmer. We've got other ones where we've got the merchant companies who have to send people. And it challenges everybody's perception of what the plantation was about, and the fact that nobody really won. It was a lose-lose across the board. But it gives us a really good opportunity to actually challenge people to have a bit of a revelation through provocation and to actually start asking themselves a few more questions about what the plantation of Derry and Ulster actually meant. So why do we do it, I hear you say? Well, through interpretation, understanding, through understanding, appreciation, and through appreciation, protection. I don't know if any of you remember whenever this sad old barge came hauled into Belfast a few years ago, and the press got hold of it and said it was a disgrace the amount of money spent on this hulk that couldn't possibly save them. What did it possibly mean for Belfast? Eventually they got their money and got her into the dry dock, and now she looks something like that. So there's a ship that was about to be scrapped, was brought back to Belfast, and through investment we were able to restore her to this. She's on the Historic Ships Register as one of the most important ships in the world. She's the last surviving White Star Line vessel in the world, and also was built on slip number 1 in the shadow of Titanic and Olympic. She was the tender ship in Cherbourg, and she's incredible. When you're on board, you're looking at the steel plates, the rivets that were done by the same men that built Titanic and Olympic, the same era. The original bars on board, a lot of the original woodworks on board. It really is a link back to our shared story within the shipyards. But it gets better. We got a phone call one day from the architect saying the builders have been scraping everything out. They'd lifted some cement and a wooden board and found an old bit of linoleum. Would we be interested in looking at it? Now, you look at it, yes, it doesn't look like much. But this was at the entrance to the first class Lewes, which very nice end of the ship. It had survived for 100 years beneath a very thin screen of cement. We took it, we got it restored and cleaned, 1/4 of a millimetre at a time, every single piece individually taken off its backing. And we were able to find out then how this was made and the component parts of it. That now looks like this. It's one of the largest single pieces of White Star Line Harland Wolff flooring that we have ever seen. We were able to find out that the black linoleum was dyed with bitumen, the red was dyed with red brick dust, and that this had survived, despite the odds, for over 100 years. And it looks slightly different to when we found it. This was heading for the skip, according to the builder. For all we know, Jacob Astor, on his way to spend a penny, or probably several pennies because he's too rich, passed over that bit of linoleum. So we've got a story there. We can actually connect people to this story. It also links them to the recreated flooring within Pneumatic. So over and above this, there are several reasons why we do this. The economic benefits to the country as a whole, with 13.4 million visits made to visitor attractions during 2013, 6.5% increase. Obviously, a population of less than 2 million within Northern Ireland. That means that we're getting a lot of people either going time and time again, or we've got a lot of tourism coming in. And tourism brings a lot of money into our economy. But more than that, it's about helping educate the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland in our story. Because if they can understand our story, they become the champions of our story. Whenever people arrive in the country and they're asking what's the best thing to do, they'll say, you simply have to go and see this, you have to go and do that. The social benefits, it's a range of interviews we did for the Guildhall exhibition, again, the plantation. As you move through, these characters turn up at several different points, and they've been interviewed about a specific part of the story of the plantation. We did workshops with them where we used the artifacts and the maps and things that we put into the exhibition so they could really understand the story of the plantation. They could discuss it Every walk of life, every community was represented within these workshops. Frank here, on the bog side, was a great character.
To me, one of the great benefits of the plantation has been the diversity which it has offered to us, because I don't know where we would have been today. We, people like myself from the peasant Irish, would we have continued to be maybe a narrow people? I don't know. But the fact that we were challenged by other traditions here, I think, has helped us to grow as well. And we have to manage to get along and probably and accommodate one another, because we're all here to stay.
That's a perception that has changed radically from the start of the workshops to the end of the exhibition, through a basic learning program of workshopping and talking to people and getting people in the room to talk about the whole things. So Frank was a real character, a real star for the project. Our biggest projects to date was King John's Castle in Limerick, which spread across a vast site, all the buildings down the side there with the mill and the Dutch-style building, the glass blocks at the front and the castle itself. Our first site visit, pre-tender, we saw signs like this all along the main route up to the castle. Welcome to historic Nicholas Street. We really hope you enjoy your visit. Apologies for the neglected state of our street. Limerick City Council and Shannon Development have neglected this area for years. Not a great start for whenever you're trying to and do some community work and re-engage people of Limerick with their story about their castle. So we spent 2 years working there, meeting people, talking to people, getting them excited about the story. The end product looks something like this. Not a typical day in Tandem. This is opening day with Michelle and Helen having a nice big chocolate muffin, cup of tea. This was possibly one of the best moments of my career so far, was that we'd wrestled with the project for 2 years in the community, and 3 ladies came up to me at this point and said, "Oh, are you the guys that did all of this?" I said, yeah, well, we're part of all the teams that did this. And they said, I'm the community representative, I'm the church representative, and I'm from Kings Island, so I represent all the people here. And can we just say thank you very much for giving us back our story and giving us back our castle and giving us a reason to be proud of Limerick again. So to actually turn that round within 2 years through actually telling the story properly and giving them back what has been seen as a symbol of oppression for 800 years, to actually make them realize that this was part of their story. We were given a target of 3 years to increase the visitor numbers from 33,000 to 90,000. At the end of year one, they hit 94,000. Limerick has actually completely reinvigorated itself around this project. They've had the City of Culture, they've had a lot of things going on, and it's been a catalyst formed around King John's Castle. It's a fantastic case study to show how interpretation can actually make a difference to an entire city. So where do we start? Well, we delve, we dig, we learn, and we question. We also have to read a lot of books. Not all of them, but a lot of them. We search through the artifacts, we speak to the archaeologists, we speak to all the people that are invested in projects. Quite often when we come into a project, an archaeologist or a working group will have been on a project for 5 or 6 years before we come along. We've got a lot to learn from them. Occasionally we find something that maybe has just been left lying around. I know that looks like a lump of rocks. It's some fools painted numbers all over. Towards the end of the project, we were talking to the archaeologist about the Great Hall beneath this. We said, so what's that pile of rocks? He said, that? Oh, I think that's the Ostman Road. The Ostman Road was the road that was built by the Vikings before the Normans came. Whenever the castle was built, this road down the bottom left here, when the castle was built, it eventually came out over it. So for 800 years, that road vanished. They found it in the archaeological dig in the 90s, dug up that section just to examine the stones, and then they left it lying in the courtyard for the next 20 years. So rather than leaving it there for the next 20 years, again, that pile of rubble, as they called it, the builder was about to take off site and just put into storage. So we decided there's a better opportunity to actually let people walk in the footsteps of the Ostmen and the Normans. Through the interpretation, we used illustration to show where the road was, show them in the courtyard where it was, and on the right-hand side, you can actually look out into the courtyard and see where that road was. So you start to understand how this whole castle evolved, where the road came from, why it's important to the story, and we all relate to roads. What I think everybody in the team will agree is that no day is the same. In Tandem, one day we could be standing on a cliff top out on very precarious looking scaffolding, or down in tunnels in a Edwardian or a Victorian fort. You'll find Richard often standing in a field in County Tyrone with a large cardboard tube, or exploring Tullahoe Fort. Out in boats, in lighthouses, in forts. Andrew Lee with his pet puffin. A night out in the Commission of Irish Lights lighthouse ship. Out along the Gobbins and Island McGee. Lots of time building sites, crawling through tunnels, on trains, on ships. But generally always working together. It's a very important part of the way we work within Tandem, that it's a team project. Because together, we achieve what we really believe are amazing transformations. But we look at a site like this, and we have to fight for it sometimes, but we get results like this. We look at hulks like this, and get results like this. We can even look at a suspended ceiling with grey carpet and yellow skirting boards, and turn it into something like this. That's exactly the same space. To do what we do, we are very, very privileged. We are very lucky to go to the places that we go, to work with the people that we work with. And one of the projects we're most proud of at the minute is we're actually working on a Seamus Heaney Centre for Blackie, which will open summer 16. And the point of making about this one really is it's not just ancient history or medieval history. There's a story to tell even today, a story that we can all share and be proud of and become part of. And one of our briefs for this is to become an inspirational centre for the people of Mid-Ulster. And if anybody can, Seamus certainly can. So we're very much looking forward to the next year on that. We all agree with this one. Interpretation is an art, which combines many arts. And just to give you a quick indication of how many arts it does involve, there's me, not quite sure what I do. There's Sandra, head of design, Andrew, graphic design, Helen, design manager, Sarah, interpretive planner, Chris, designer, Michelle, project manager, Rebecca, working with project manager to support and manage all the projects, Richard, marketing and design, and Andrew. But it's not just us. We're a good, strong team, but we work with many other people, and this is key to what we do. We don't try and do everything ourselves. We work with architects, archaeologists, historians, costume designers, set designers, film camera crews, directors, interactive designers, even stuffed birds. I just want to say a big thank you to the team at Tandem, because I say without all of them, none of us could do what we do. It's a phenomenal team covering a wide range of skills, and it's a pleasure to work with them and a wonderful place to work for me. My long-suffering family, who spend a lot of time in dressing up clothes, touring the castles and places of Ireland. But the good bit really is, on Fit Out Day, whenever we're standing there, we're seeing the panels going in, we're seeing the interactives going up, we're seeing set works appear, we find out it actually will fit into the space and you can still get somebody in it. We start seeing people responding to the exhibitions, the interpretation, and we really get a buzz out of that. Because I said at the start, it's everything from prehistory to modern history to indoor to outdoor to artifacts to physical interactives. And it's a pleasure to work with it. So I am more than happy now to take some Q&A. So. On pretty much most projects because we will tend to be working with academics, and academics are definitely a different type of wiring to ourselves, and they're very focused on the minutiae, the tiny detail, and trying to get everything across. We'll quite often remind them the average reading age in the UK and Ireland is 11, and also the attention span is less than 3 minutes. So if they start losing us when they're talking to us, they're definitely going to lose the audience. Quite often it's a case of showing them what we do. And once we get further in the Seamus Heaney project, working with an absolute star who is passionate about Heaney poetry, he wants to have every single poem ever written within the exhibition. We can't do that. We want to actually bring people in slowly and let them understand it. Poetry is one of those things that people will immediately say, oh, that's not for me. So it's a big challenge in the Heaney Centre, because the only way for any visitor centre to actually be sustainable is to appeal to a mass audience. And that's really a process we always go through. We go through several processes with clients, with the academics, with audience development, to try and help people understand why we're doing things, how we're going to do them, and what the end results will be. And hopefully our project speaks for themselves. And there's, at King John's, there's one particular academic expert took a long time to get on board. And at the end of it, he came and said, "Hi, you've done all right." That's as good as it gets. So yeah, it's just not so much a clash, but an education process. You need to move them at different paces through the exhibition. For instance, if quite often we're given a space rather than designing a space, so we have to work within a space. So if there's a particularly narrow point, we have to make sure that they go through that quickly. If there's a bit that we want to slow them down and make sure they're really observant. One of the biggest challenges is when you present people with an image, they will glance at the image, but we need them to actually look into the image to understand what they're doing. So quite often that's where creative writing will really help people understand. A fantastic caption with an image will help them understand what they're supposed to look at. So we also will take people on the emotional trajectory where we'll build them up. For instance, the siege. When they're coming down the stairs to the siege, they go past the big illustrations of heads and spikes. I'm trying to get the point to them that in the 1630s and early 1640s, Ireland was a pretty dangerous place to be. And if you sneezed the wrong way or got caught in the wrong street, you pretty much were dead. So you had to be very careful where you went. So we want to get people quite wary and nervous as they go down to this next zone, because it's a big question we always have as well. As yes, this was 360 years ago, but a lot of people died within that siege, and we never want to treat death and murder in a Disney way, because we have to be sensitive. There are still bodies under King John's Castle to be found, so we want to make sure that any stories we're telling at the right pace, at the right level, and having the right impact. One of the biggest surprising facts for us at King John's was that another 50 people died after the siege was lifted. And how come? Because they got out. They actually got out and they ate. But because they'd been starving, they actually gorged themselves. They used to eat a small meal, but too many of them, and they died from gorging, and their stomachs inflamed and they died. So it's trying to tell that story that, within this dramatic moment, and yes, there are humorous moments and crazy stories, but it's real life and it's real people. So it's taken them on a time journey, but also an emotional journey. 'Cause Yeah, and a lot of people expect it to be able to work in a vacuum. So, whenever we're working a project, you have to get the local people involved. You have to get taxi drivers involved because they're the ones that are either going to make or break it when people come out of the train station. You have to make sure that a whole community is involved. Even when we were working on Limerick, I was in the pub one night only for dinner, and the lady sitting next to me was having a row with her husband, and the husband off to the toilet, and she said, "You having a good night?" "Yeah, thanks." Just happy sitting. I said, "Oh, you're from the north?" "Uh-huh." "What are you doing down here?" "Oh, just working at King John's Castle. We're designing a new visitor experience. Have you heard much about it? It's all been in the press." "Why do we need somebody from the north coming down here telling us our story?" I said, "What do you mean, our story? You're talking about a castle that's 800 years old, and you're talking about a border that's less than 100 years old. It's all of our story." Oh, I suppose we had a really good chat then. And then I know she left that pub that night thinking, what a great project, what a great opportunity. So it's trying to make sure that every time you meet somebody about a project, you enthuse about it. When you're having a discussion with an archaeologist, keeping them on board. Because all of these people, I said earlier, it's making sure that all these people become champions of it. Because if you do something in a bubble, or a client has expectations that they will have a world-class visitor experience for £25,000, it's trying to manage that expectation as well. That world-class is one of the most overused terms in our industry. World-class is things like the Ulster Museum, Titanic Belfast, but they are multi-million-pound projects. When a client comes to us, I had one client recently say, "We want this." What is that? "Gesture recognition. We want gesture recognition." "Why do you want gesture recognition?" "Because it's cool." But they haven't actually thought through why they wanted it, what it could do, and we actually showed them actually having a physical thing that kids could turn wheels on actually would mean more to them and would break a lot less. So there's a whole lot of people you've got to bring in the journey. There's the client and educating them what is realistic about the budget. And that's the biggest challenge to our industry at the minute. Budgets are getting smaller. Expectations are getting bigger because as a country, our tourism's got better. So people now look at other projects that maybe there's $500,000 or $1 million or $3 million spent on them, and for their smaller budget, they want that. And we can do really good interpretation, but just less of it. So that at the end of the project, they will see less. They won't have maybe a room this size full, but they'll have something really good that tells a story. So it's about not working the bubble. It's about trying to bring everybody on board. It's marketing as well. Is one of our projects, not any fault of our own. We recommended from the start that they put money into the marketing, and they started marketing a year before the launch. They didn't. On opening day, there was nobody there. You have to look at the bigger picture. It's like any design work. You can't just design something and presume it's going to work. So. Everything on Pneumatic, everything in Guildhall, everything King John's Castle, we will write the creative brief. We'll run the tender process, preferably with the clients, because they can do all the heavy lifting in that. We'll assess the tenders, we'll appoint the companies, we'll brief them, we'll provide them research packages, we'll go through the process with them, and ultimately we will approve things before we even show it to the client, because we want to make sure it stays in voice, because at the early stages we have a vision for the project, and we also know every little intimate detail of that project. One of the suppliers in King John's Castle, it was really focused on what they were doing. They were doing fantastic work. And he came to one of our presentations to the client where all the other creative companies were presenting off the back of us. And he came out and said, "Jeez, I thought we were busy." So it's the whole package. And we're creative lead on every project as well. So even at King John's Castle, the architectural detailing, for instance, the big glass box had no glass in it. So we insisted that the big glass box had glass put into it so you could see through to it. We looked at the visitor flow through it. We looked at, worked with clients on ticketing and point of entry and how they can best do it, whether it should be guided tour or self-guided. So every single aspect of the project. And I think that's what a lot of people, the guy that asked me when we put up the posters, don't really get the scale of the way we work. And that's why we've got such a diverse team. Yeah. But working with all those other creative companies, we're working with a new copyright at the minute, which is fantastic, because our challenge says getting the word count down, and he's just bringing a whole lovely fresh slant to the way we can use words. And if you use less words brilliantly, then you can capture people instantly. So it's brilliant to work with so many people. There's two things. One of my favourite things we've done wasn't necessarily the most challenging was talking about Ireland in the 1630s and losing your head. We were having a creative session within work, and one of the team got up to leave the room, and she said, "Just stick some heads in spikes." Haha. She came back in, and I doodled out heads on spikes, and they're in the exhibition, and it's actually used for the signage. It's head this way, and you go down this. And as you walk past it, you hear a sound that goes boom, and the head rolls past you and things. So it's trying to just, I'd say we don't belittle death, but occasionally it's quite good fun. One of the big things we've been fighting for was to get the walkway down into the Great Hall. It's one of the first things we do when we go to site, is just climb and go everywhere. Climb down to the Great Hall. It's the original level of the courtyard, so you really get a sense of the castle and the foreboding nature of it and the connection to the river, which you don't get within the courtyard. Turned up in a meeting one day. They were going through all the minutes, said, yes, walkway in the Great Hall removed. And I think it was Michelle and myself, we're sitting there, or Helen and myself, and we were going through and went, did you just say walkway removed? Yeah, he did. Did you just say the walkway's been removed? Yeah, it's too expensive, it's gone. When you're sitting in a room full of burly project managers and builders, and you have to have a hissy fit, because you know that it's a very important thing. There's a certain amount of blushing involved, but they put the walkway back in, and it was definitely one of the things that we fought the hardest for, and one of the things that whenever the clients went down into it was put in, they went, oh yeah, that was a good idea. So that's one of those win moments.